Welcome to another episode of Ignite Agility. Today we have Tracy Katlack.
Hello.
We're going to be talking about help. I'm programmed for Scrum and my company is trying to install a safe cartridge. But first, hit like and subscribe. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe and listen on because Tracy is going to share 3 ways you can add value despite the environment that you're in, and also 3 coping strategies for you to stay safe. So, Tracy, tell us a little bit about you. How long have you been a Scrum Master and where are you at with all this Scrummy stuff?
In this scrummy world, for since a little bit before the pandemic, I actually have a pandemic career
Mm.
where I switched from being a data analyst and then became a Scrum Master and fell in love with it and started continuing on from the certified Scrum Master to the advanced to the professional. I've really enjoyed learning different things and being able to actually take this agile world into my personal life. So I don't always feel like, oh, I'm practicing agile. I just am. That's I've been in that mindset for a while, and now I am an agile coach, and and in a safe world. So I was programmed our in Scrum, but now I've been learning for the last year and a half or so safe and how those are different, how to help out my teams in a safe world, and still bringing in that Scrum world too, just in case they switch over to that.
And just to be clear, because you are a consultant now, so you don't always get the luxury of sometimes even knowing
Yeah,
what a client is using, because just over 20 years ago, it would have been easier to just say Scrum.
yeah,
But now in 2024, there's 30 some different versions
right.
of Scrum
And
and Agile out there. And you said safe. And just so our listeners understand, Scaled Agile Framework, its abbreviation or kitschy title is safe. But there's SAFE's version of Scrum, SCRUMStudy's version of Scrum, Project Management Institute's version of Scrum, and all those are completely different than
yeah,
the official version of Scrum that you learned when you got your CSM and your advanced CSM.
yes, it being in this world, I've decided that I feel like I'm like my daughter's Nintendo Switch. I'm programmed with Scrum, but I have that ability to learn very quickly. And so that's what I'll say in this realm of agile world where we have all these different things coming in. It's great to stay true to what you've learned and and have that as your values and your base. But like for me now, learning things about safe, I'm bringing those elements in and being able to share with the teams how things are different. So I feel like my job as a Scrum Master or an Agile coach is to learn what that is and give people the best points of that, of saying, hey, this is the best bang for your buck. This is my role is coming in and helping people out with, you don't need to learn everything. Here's your best bang for your buck. Here's your next step. Then having to switch over, it's like, oh, I actually kind of felt stupid going into my client the first time because they were using words like iteration goals. And I was like, that's not Scrum. That's right. It wasn't. It was Safe's version of goals. They use different words.
And, the color commentary, the trigger warning, because trigger warning, what's happening, there's nothing original and safe. They didn't come up with the word iteration. That word
Yeah.
originated in DSTM, in extreme programming. So nothing in safe is original, and how they may or may not be using it um, may be completely different.
Yeah.
So you're taking that tack of learning, but you heard me say trigger warning. So for people who are listening who see those posts on LinkedIn or social media, or even find themselves piling on,
Yeah.
with that's not Scrum. Well, that's not Agile. Well, who cares? So often I don't think that anybody hits the pause button to even
Mm.
say, wait a minute,
Yeah.
whose version of Scrum are we following? Or
Yeah.
when you say Agile, what do we
Yes.
mean? And I'm intentionally using scare quotes because that word is just so subverted. So we might not even know the right questions to ask if we don't know which cartridge is being
Yeah.
installed.
I think that there's times that Agile also gets a bad rap, or Scrum gets a bad
For
rap, or
sure.
anything, because we're just mixing all those things together, and they're like, well, that doesn't work. Well, we had a conversation a couple weeks ago, where we were talking about, what's something that's going on in your world right now that's a problem. I'm like, story points. And you were quick to say, that's not Scrum.
And I was just
It's
like,
not.
trigger warning.
Yeah.
I was like, why are we even bothering with that?
Right. And but that actually, like, that's what like made me spark and go, you know what, I'm putting those things all together, and I'm also I'm allowing it to happen. There have been times, absolutely, as a Scrum Master, as an Agile coach, that I'm raising my hand, like I'm guilty. I'm absolutely guilty of misrepresenting. And so for me, it's great to come on back, read the Scrum Guide every day, love it. And that's my integrity. And so if I can remain in my integrity space, um, I'm I think of that's my servant leadership. That's my servant leadership to Agile. I'm servant leader to my product team. I'm a servant leader to my development team, but also Agile as a whole. And so there are times that, yeah, I feel like I'm not doing my craft justice. And so I need to come on back and have that moment of centering. But I do this also when now my client works in SAFe. And so there are times, especially before those big ceremonies, because we still have ceremonies
Does
in
SAFe
that
call them
framework.
ceremonies? Because that word has never existed in the Scrum framework.
I That's a great question.
And I'm sincerely asking for a friend,
Yeah.
because that word has never existed in the Scrum framework and people use it. It's so weird.
Yeah.
It just hangs
Because,
on like a word whisker. And I don't know if you know what I'm saying? Like that just needs to be
yeah.
saved. But if things like Scaled Agile Framework are perpetuating a lot of those myths,
It-
or words that don't translate well
yeah.
in a global workplace.
And it might be, and this again, I'm raising my hand that I might be allowing the not right word to, like you had said, perpetuate on and go forward. I'm actually going to take that as a takeaway to see, so we can start calling them the
Their
uh,
events.
their events, the
I
events
have
that they
no
are.
idea what SAFe calls them
Yeah,
because I don't speak SAFE, but when that cartridge gets installed with me, system failure. So I tend to reject the cartridge. But because we were trying to have an open conversation, especially with you as a consultant, pushed into or thrust into a lot of these different environments, one of the things we want to do is give listeners some things they can do, right? So, how
yeah,
can you, maybe you're having that internal fight with yourself, like, oh, this is really going against my grain because I'm not wired this way. And I want to just tell them scrum, 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 but they're saying safe, safe, safe. Well, are there things that you find as a coach or as a scrum master that you can do to add value despite the situation? Like
yeah, no,
let's not worry, Scrum's version of Scrum, Safe's version of Scrum, PMI's version of Scrum. Who cares? What
yeah.
can we do to add value?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that I would say, every person, this is not just a Scrum Master, an Agile coach, this is every person. should really be connected into the 5 whys. And if you can't do 5 whys, start with 1.
And by 5 whys, we mean?
It is a cause and effect technique to determine what a root cause is. So if I say is, if we hear feedback, this is a problem, well, why? Why is that a problem? Oh, it's because I didn't get my stuff in time and I now am delayed. Okay, well, what can we do? Is there someone I can connect with? It at least starts a conversation. Sometimes it's hard to know what that root cause is. So sometimes it needs more than one why to get at that place. And we also want to, if you're doing, like I've done 5 whys in a retro before, and definitely make sure it's not people orientated, it's just process orientated. Safe spaces to talk about that. But being able to just at least ask why, because maybe something's super important to somebody. I've had developers before say, this is important for me to have done so I can go to the next step. But maybe our product owner didn't know that piece because we're technical and we're strategy over here. And so we trust that our people are coming back together to share that information of why.
Well, and not for the purposes of sounding like we're for, but to your point,
Yeah.
to get to root cause or to advance the conversation.
Yeah, it's just try to find a solution that we're all talking about. I think that's the key to that. You can't just have just one person in there. You want to have everyone in, because everybody's going to give a different idea to that. So an example would be, hey, we might not be hitting our goals in our iteration. Well, why? And if somebody could say, well, it's because the development team doesn't have they didn't get things done. But let's take a look at it in a different perspective. Let's reframe it. Okay, what could the Scrum Master do? What could the PO do? What can the dev team do? What can our leadership do? What can everybody's got a person or a perspective and can bring something to the table that will make a decision better. So having that openness to ask why is, go ahead.
I was just going to say, what's another way you could add value?
Another way is, regardless, you could be working in waterfall even. That's a trigger warning.
I've actually been working on that. I'm okay with that. I think honestly, so many people are doing it anyway. Just call it what it is,
Yep. But even you want to continuously improve. Take time to continuously improve. And I like looking at this actually with Simone Biles, right? She's greatest of all time, in at least right now for gymnastics. She is killing it out there, but she's still advancing herself. Like I think she just got another gymnastics move like named after her because she keeps excelling and pushing herself. So I would say to everybody, regardless of where you're working, how you're working, take a moment to look at your process and to see, is there any way to make that? And that's sometimes really hard too, is to look objectively.
Yeah. Earlier today, I was on a client call and one of the phrases somebody was using was, well, we're not perfect yet. We're not perfect yet. And I said, hold on, there's no such thing. So this is about continuously improving. It's not about being perfect.
And we don't want to be perfect. You want to be able to grow. You should feel that need to expand yourself, and even if it's like trying a new food, that's continuously improving yourself. So when it comes to work, though, I think we can always look at our processes. We can look at our communication styles. We can look at how do we make decisions. Those are all easy things that we can like go into. if you're a new Scrum Master coming in new, so I have a new team right now, and they switched from safe Scrum to safe Kanban, but we
Oh my
don't really,
God, there's such a thing called Safe
there
Kanban?
there is a safe Kanban, and it's a weekly process. I just have those columns and I just move things around. No,
Yeah.
there's so if for a new person to come in, one of the things that I would suggest, and I just actually got this now, if you're like, I don't know where to start, ask what do you get audited on? Because also as a coach on my end, I took a look at an audit list and I said, well, that doesn't make sense. Or I went back into, for me, I went part's good. But I often take that back and going, I look at the audits, I look at what are the rules of the game, right? What does my cartridge say? What are we supposed to be looking at? How are we supposed to be growing? Because my job is to help them learn whatever framework we're working in.
And do you have a final thought on how to add value despite what may be going on or not going on in the environment?
Yeah, absolutely. My last one for now would be active listening. I'm gonna raise my hand again and say this is hard for me sometimes. And what do I mean by active listening? This is assessing all forms of communication. So this is listening to the words that are coming out, but also what is the tone? Do we have emotions behind that? Or you could even look at it as who's not saying anything, because sometimes that says a lot. A lot of times for me in my retros, when everyone is quiet, I'm like, that's not good, because there's something going on. So then I take that as that's my job to figure out what's happening. And so sometimes then we'll still have the retro, but I'll follow up one-on-one with fine folks and say like, hey, what's up? Because you were really quiet and usually you're not. And I know you have good ideas, so you want to talk about it. But also, if you're on a Zoom call and nobody's on camera, because that doesn't happen very often, at least for me, looking to see when people are going on and off mute, because somebody has something important to say usually, unless if there's a cat going across your keyboard. But
Yeah.
it's important to look at all types of communication and what's not being communicated. Sometimes you could do different, you could do different types of retros. So I use Mural a lot in my retros, and you can have it be completely anonymous. And so I have set up spaces then if people would just, they can, it's like a comment box or an improvement box. They just put whatever it is in there, and then we look at that at the end of our iteration, I guess.
Well, and the staying anonymous in a retro also helps focus on the idea, not on the
The
person.
person. Yep.
But that active listening is going to take paying attention
Yep.
and not waiting to talk, or, it's really hard to listen
Yeah.
when you're talking.
A lot of times, and I'm guilty of this too. I listen to respond. And there, in my earlier years of being a Scrum Master, I would listen for like the keyword and then go back up into my world and like try to find where that was and provide my insight, or the information on that from the Scrum Guide. And what they also, yes, they need that, but how does it apply to them? And so you can even ask them, how do you want to apply this? This is what we're trying to do. This is the outcome we're looking for. How do you want to get there? Sometimes they have the best ideas and they want to, and that's also self-empowerment. They're driving themselves, and then I can say at the end, did that work or didn't it?
I think it's also indicative of a newer Scrum Master versus somebody who has experience. Because when we're newer, we may be struggling for how to add value, or just,
Oh, yeah.
hey, I have to be the problem solver. Nope, it's not about you, right?
Yeah.
Take it to the team, reframe the question, ask them for their input and their ideas. But that all comes from actively listening, like you said, to not only what's being said, but what's not being said.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, because I had my little trigger warnings in this conversation, and certainly if we're programmed for Scrum and we're having a really hard time working any other way when that other cartridge is installed, whether it's, PMI's version or Safe's version or whoever,
Yeah.
are there things then we can pivot to help people just personally cope? I'll call that a coping strategy, because maybe internally I want to go, but I don't want to do that in front of
Yeah.
my client or whoever I'm serving, because that's not what it's about. So, what kind of coping strategy advice do you have for people to stay sane if they're in
Yeah.
that situation?
Yeah, it's hard. And even just recognizing that, you know what, this is difficult. Number one, just being aware that it's okay to feel these feelings. It's okay. It's okay to be frustrated. One of the things that I think about a lot is when I'm frustrated, it means I'm passionate. I'm passionate about what I'm doing. I want people to succeed. I don't want to show people like, you're wrong, this isn't what this is doing. No, I want people to succeed. I want to be able to step back. But I do have my own coping mechanisms, and one of the very first ones, that it's going to sound super simple, but it's effective, in breathing. Take a deep breath. And for me, I push my shoulders down too, because I notice like when I get all worked up and if I'm stressed out or if I'm anxious, I do this.
Mm.
And so I know that I need to take that deep breath and push my shoulders down, and that actually helps like center me also, and going, all right, and take that minute and that moment. It maybe not a minute, you don't need to breathe deep for a minute, but take a moment to gather your thoughts again, or even be able to pause the conversation, so that way you can facilitate and get control back, so we can get to an outcome. At the end of the day, it's still, my first step is breathe in deep, push my shoulders down, get recentered. And if you need to take a break, take a break.
Yeah.
But by deep breathing, that helps regulate your nervous system, as somebody who has lots of emotions and very expressive with emotions. um, Sometimes I need to calm my nervous system down, and a deep breath will do it.
Nice. What's another one that you like to use for yourself
Another
to just stay sane in this kind of environment?
one of the things that, and it's going to sound a little weird, but it's really spoken to me, as someone who has gone through grief therapy, and I lean into the Kubler-Ross, the 5 stages of grief. And actually, bonus, there's a 6th. I
Hmm.
just found that out in 2020, I believe. They've added a new stage. So let me go through those stages first so I can explain what they are and how they relate to me. So the stages of grief are shock and denial. Then we have anger, and we have bargaining and depression. All of those to me is this just big slope of big feelings that happen. Everybody processes differently. But and in terms of like length of time, and each stage is not this like a same length, it's just you're processing. So when I think of things now, when I think of people going through a change to a framework, it's not me they're reacting to, it's a change.
Well,
It's
and it's
just
not
that,
even a change to the framework. It's a way they're being asked to do their job.
yeah, I mean,
That
like
gets a little personal for some people.
it does. I've said this before. It's like some people, that's their baby, and they've been successful with their baby in this world, right? And then all of a sudden, yes, the company's coming in and saying, "Hey, we're going to have you switch to this." And there's a lot of resistance there probably to begin with. So at each one of those stages of those big feelings, there's different support that as a Scrum Master I can give, but also I keep in the back of my mind that they're not reacting to Tracy, they're reacting to the news. And so what Tracy can do to keep Tracy's sanity is help them get to the next step. There's sometimes that I will like in shock and denial, people don't want to listen. They don't. So for me, I sit back and I kind of wait until they get to anger. I honestly will wait until they get to anger, because at least at anger, they're starting to envision their current process and how that relates to the new one. And they're fighting for what it is that they think is right. So if I think of it in their shoes, and keeping in mind that they're going through grief, and then I can help them, and bring in some empathy, and kind of share, okay, here's your next step. Sometimes at some steps we just need really good information. So in that anger stage, I like giving information from really credible sources, or here's a podcast, here's a really reputable article that can help you, and let's talk about it afterwards. But I'm going to let them drive their information taken, because if I push it, they're going to come at me and I'm going to lose my mind. For bargaining, people are usually trying to say that I'm already doing this. That's what I'm already doing this. Okay, so then I come back in with yes, but
Do you do
yes,
yes, but, or do you do yes, and?
both.
Okay.
Yes, but, and yes, and I love that you know that. It's yes, but we want this too. Yes, and add this in. But I like it in terms of we're talking about outcomes at that point, so we can get a good conversation going of, okay, yes, but that doesn't do this part of the outcome that we're looking for. Or we can say yes, and that covers this too. So I feel like in the beginning of your career as a Scrum Master or in this space, you're probably going to be a yes, but. And then as you start to learn to connect with people and you are growing, it's going to be yes, and. Because we're going to help them with their next step on top of it.
Well, it also signifies movement. You touched on the last stage, but I don't think you gave us the bonus
So,
number 6. So you got to
yeah,
tell us 5 and 6 here.
yeah, 5 is acceptance. So when we get down to the very last of our slope of those big feelings, that's depression. As a Scrum Master, that's where I'm coming in. I'm coming in hot. I'm going to give you guys a win, and I'm going to help you get there. And that's going to start your trajectory back up. And so acceptance, it doesn't mean that I disregard everything else that I've done. It's that I'm learning something new, and I'm gonna take the great product that I have right now, and I'm gonna make it even better, going back up into that continuous improvement and where we want to grow into. After we get to acceptance, the 6th stage is finding meaning. And so the way that I think of it is, after we go through that slope of the big feelings back up, we're going to be sharing our information. We're going to help others. We're going to find that meaning for other people and share that information. That's the way that I apply it into the business standpoint. People that are going through grief for a person or a family member, a friend, pets, they find a different way to have purpose. And a lot of times that's by sharing the experience of what grief looked like and how you can help somebody else.
Well, and for people who hear Kubler-Ross. I mean, what kind of podcast did I stumble on? Is this, did somebody pass away? What's going on? Do you have a final coping strategy that might be totally different?
Yeah, absolutely. I will say this, connect. When I'm super stressed out or if I'm upset or if I'm not getting my message out correctly, or if I'm confused, connect into your manager, your peers, your boss, a mentor, communities of practice. I firmly believe in communities of practice because you get, again, it's kind of like when we were talking about the whys, right? The 5 whys, and everybody's coming in. Having so many people that are passionate about what they do and in explaining like, this is how I've done this, or applying it even in real life. I know this is not safe or it's not Scrum, but like my daughter and I, we do things that are, we do story pointing, but for foods. And so she's scared of food. And so we do things that are like, is this a 1, 2, or 3? And 1 is not scary at all. 3 is I have no idea what that could be. And 2 is I'll give it a fair shot. So she puts things 1, 2s, 3s, and we've been doing this for less than 3 weeks, and she's tried at least 7 new foods just by playing and by like looking at it, analyzing it, and going like, what do I see, what don't I see? And then for mom to have that safe space for her to explore in. So I think of all of this stuff like, we're doing it in our work life, but it comes home too. And so there's just lots of different ways to connect and get new ideas. I know I shared this with one of my peers at my current employment, and he was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to do that for my kids for hockey. And so it was very cool because they're not out there doing as the hard like the whatever the plays are. I don't know hockey. Let's talk about dance. I
You
can
live
do
in
dance.
Minnesota and you don't know hockey?
I
What?
don't know hockey. I know dance.
Well, girl mom, right? Versus boy mom. Well, so
Yep.
that connection, though, that's really important. We have a free Ignite Agility meetup that we host once a month. And oftentimes people will come to those just because they want to connect with other like minded individuals or Scrum Masters or coaches, sometimes even just to level set on Scrum,
Yeah.
even though they're asked to work in a not so ideal environment for them. Oh, I just had to take this job, so it's project management, but I don't want to give up Scrum and I want to stay connected and I want to keep my skills current and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So that user group is a really great way for people to continue to learn from each other, but also to cope, right?
Yeah.
In addition to adding value or learning new ways to add value despite the environment that they're in.
Absolutely.
We can drop
Yeah.
that in the show notes too. We just use Meetup, just meetup.com, Ignite Agility, if people want to join, because it's completely free, as is our podcast. So, Tracy, can't thank you enough for stopping by today. Any final pearls of wisdom to leave with our listeners?
I would say be open and honest of where you are, because when I walked into an environment that was using SAFe and I was programmed for Scrum, I was really open about it. I just said, hey, I don't know this specifically, but I can learn it. And so that's the great part about what we're doing, is that we're there to help get all the information and give, not all the information, but a lot of information, and give those good tips so people can start running fast. And then you can just build off of that. I would say just be yourself. I know it's really hard, but keep your integrity too. That's something that I always now check in with on myself, of going, all right, I'm a Scrum Master, but I'm doing SAFe. I can actually help them in both ways. I can give them information in one and the other, and just have the patience of learning. And it's okay. It's okay if you fail.
Right.
That's the path. It's okay if things happen. So also keep that in mind. I would say it's okay. It's gonna be okay. We'll get there.
Well, thanks again for being on our show.